I'm Suzanne,
And I'm Zoe.
and you are listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. We've got a special episode today because we're with somebody that I've known for a very long period of time, Caroline Bobby, who is a psychotherapist, 65 years old. And back in 2007 to 2017, she decided to, as she puts it, start to stroke naked men. And it was kind of a calling, as she puts it. But part of the reason why we thought we'd have this conversation now, which is 2000, my maths is terrible as well, 6 years after you stopped stroking naked men, was that Caroline asked me if we could share and talk about, and she could reflect on that experience in her life, looking back, which you've not really done before. You sort of did it in the midst of it, but not really looking back and thinking about now, what is, as a 65-year-old woman, what does that really feel like and mean? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that? So Caroline, hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. I have
Hi.
so many questions.
And I'm just going, oh, I've never been on a podcast before, so give me a minute.
Oh, we're
And it's a
so
pre-record, by the way, so it's not live. So
Oh,
we edit this and everything. So yeah, it's a free flowing kind of thing. So yeah, you're not live. There's no one
actually
listening. Yeah.
actually while we're now just chatting, I what I want to ask is uh, is this something that you did? I mean, I'll ask all these questions if you are open to having questions asked, but I am fascinated. If you did this in sort of a therapeutic with a therapeutic intent, I'm so excited to hear that. So I'm very do you want to start by telling the story, or should we start with some questions?
No, tell the story.
I mean, a bit of both, I guess. I mean,
Okay.
first of all, to let you both know, Suzanne probably knows already, you can ask me anything. You know, I'm exceptionally out in almost every sort of, I can't think of anything that's not out. And some of it is quite sort of close to the edge for some people. So
I,
there is no go anywhere. Feel free.
yeah. Okay. I'm a you don't know me, but I'm a certified sexologist, very sex positive. I am also very open
Mm,
and supportive of anything as long as it's consensual and no one's getting hurt.
lovely,
So,
lovely to meet
yeah,
you. I like your hat.
yes. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
so how did it all start, Caroline? Just give us a bit of context.
So there I was, 40 something, late 40s, and having identified and sort of spent most of my kind of adult sort of sexual life identifying as a lesbian, but not a kind of really hardcore lesbian, in that I was sort of not somebody who found men revolting or horrifying. I just sort of, the lesbians adopted me when I was about 14 and I ran away from home, and I sort of joined the gang, and that had suited me very well, although I had an occasional sort of play with the odd man over the years. Around 2007, like something was brewing in me, and it was a sort of desire to play to play with men. And the most upsetting thing about that was it sort of meant that I couldn't really legitimately call myself a lesbian anymore, which felt like a real loss, because I liked being a lesbian. And it took me quite a long time to sort of, as a very sort of ambivalent bisexual, to get to realize that I'm queer. I've always been queer, I just didn't know that because we didn't have that vocabulary. But I'm definitely queer, so that felt better. Uh, I'm digressing a bit. So at this point, I'm a middle-aged. Well, yeah, I'm a middle-aged psychotherapist, and I love my work. And suddenly, I wanted to kind of open a space that was in structure and form very like the psychotherapeutic space, but I wanted to be offering myself in a sort of devotional but very boundaried service to men. I mean, and women if they showed up, which they did occasionally. And my head went, Caroline, you can't do this. It's against the psychotherapy police's rule book. And that went on for a bit. And then I just, it was such a clear, sort of simple call that underneath all the noise was just the simple. And I just understood that if I didn't do it, I'd never know. So I really thought it through in terms of the sort of pragmatics, really, sort of how to set it up on my terms. And I kind of made a deal with myself that if at any point it felt not okay, then I would step back out. And it was really as simple as that. And it was back in the day before it was right sort of before everything was online. So sort of sex ads were in the back of those free papers that don't exist anymore. And
Yeah.
even Time Out had a page for sex ads. And so I had 20 words to sell my beautiful self or invite people into this experiment that I was having with myself. And I think I began with, would you like to be lovingly touched rather than handled? And
Okay.
technology advanced and lots of things happened and it all went online. But really, that initial, are you looking for loving pleasuring rather than mechanistic handling, that was always the heart of my advertising sort of voice. And when it got online, I just sat amongst all the breasts and cum shots and sort of enormous boobs and, you know, do you want to have sex with your granny and all the weirdness that was out there. And there'd be just a little picture of my face with possibly a dash of lipstick, just kind of saying the same thing, really. That's how I set it up, and that's where I began. And that was the door opening to something that was very strong and clear in me, but that I didn't really fully, I trusted rather than understood what I was doing.
And in in amongst the breasts and the cum shots and stuff like that, what kind of people turned up and responded?
One of the results from inviting in that way, which is just me, it's my authentic meanness, you know that, Suzanne. It's like
Yes.
it's just me. What it did was it minimized the people who weren't my naked men. It didn't not it sadly it didn't like um it didn't get rid of them entirely by a long shot, but what I was speaking to, the men I was speaking to and the odd woman that I was speaking to, they heard me. So they came, so to speak, sometimes more than once. And and so did quite a lot of the others. But I got only time in my life I've ever had two phones. I had a naked phone and a normal phone, and I just got really fucking shit hot at phone, and and actually over that decade, that I spent doing this work, excuse me, probably the most tiny percentage of not my people actually showed up at my front door and ended up in, in my room, in my blue room, as I called it, because it was at the time, because I caught them on the phone.
Yeah, yeah. Because you do have to get very good at separating out whether there's somebody that actually wants what you're prepared and want to give, and someone who just sees somebody that does just want to get off,
Yeah,
right? And I suspect that that is about getting really clear on the phone about what you are or not willing to do.
pragmatic level, yes. But also somebody who starts off by saying, "Do you suck cock?" is
Yeah.
is is really not on the phone with the right person. Um, and that's obvious. But what was more kind of interesting in a way were people who were disguising themselves as someone else, maybe even partly to themselves.
Mm,
But I've been a psychotherapist for, you know, kind of at that point about 25 years. So I am good at hearing what isn't being said. I hear the subtext, I hear the
mm,
code. So, which was a huge, huge asset.
mm.
Yeah, Caroline, I'm so curious. What, who were your people? Who was it? Let's talk about the men first. Who are the men that you were serving in this endeavor? What was it that they were missing that called to you um, to give them in this loving touch?
I think if I had to really make a haiku out of answering that question, it would be something to do with loneliness,
Hmm.
Mm,
longing and loneliness. And some of these guys were like in very functional and even friendly long-term partnerships or marriages, but
mm,
they were lonely. And,
mm,
I think we're often not so much just speaking about sort of the naked men, but just myself working in the zone of intimacy with human beings over sort of 3.5 decades. I think we're often lonely for ourselves, and we and culture sort of across the globe, really, in different sort of ways, it encourages and reinforces this idea that we're lonely for this sort of magical other. I don't believe that's true, and I believe subscribing to that idea causes so much pain and suffering and struggle and confusion and chaos in the sort of field of technical word attachment, which
Hmm.
I think is a fancy word for love and connection. Love and connection were all sort of, but the thing is, I reckon it needs to start here. Like, how is my relationship with myself?
mm,
Is there some good love and connection going on at the sort of internal home address? Generally, I don't like to generalize, but generally, I think not.
mm,
It's not particularly intimate, sort of self. So then
mm.
we sort of bomb around like attaching to people and then getting really upset because it doesn't hit the spot.
Caroline, you're speaking my language. I wrote a book called Radical Intimacy, and that this is very
Oh,
much the premise of that.
nice
We
title.
Yeah. We can meet each other to the extent that we can meet ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what strikes me as um, I love your story and I love the inspiration to help people in this way and help heal people in this way. There, in recent times, there's been for quite a while sex surrogates,
Yeah.
and there's a whole sort of newish discipline called somatic sex worker or
Yes.
somatic sex therapy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where there's actually hands on. And as someone who treats clients in the sexual realm, there are so many times where clearly, like, I can only do so much, and then someone's got to get hands on them. And I'm
Mm,
often coaching partners
mm,
to do that for each other.
mm,
But but it's such a beautiful idea that someone could come to you for that kind of healing
mm,
experience in a way, you
mm.
know. And the idea that sex can be healing or
Yes.
sexual activity.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, it's very, very powerful to be reflective, and I have obviously I mean, I would call this chapter in the actuality of pretty much decade that I was offering this a constant revelation to my own understanding of what I was up to,
Mhm.
and also since sort of bringing it to a close, I'm still understanding sort of
Mhm.
layers of what it was that I was up to, but in the sort of structural reality of what I was offering, I was not offering sexual intercourse, although occasionally that happened if I felt like I wanted to hop on somebody, I would. um, but what I was really offering was to receive. Like my kind of my word was and still is in many ways welcome, like
Mhm.
really welcome. Let's make you really welcome. And if somebody was saying what are your boundaries and your do's and don'ts, like I used a massage table, I would um, invite somebody to like unwrap themselves. I might help them unwrap themselves. I definitely wasn't kind of dressed up in high heels and stockings. I was usually wearing something like a sarong around my waist and a sort of nice kind of vesty thing, which is the sort of thing I like to wear.
Mm.
So simple and but not a lot of clutter and certainly not any theatrics.
Mm.
So it was kind of like come in, be welcome, be here. Very simple and very different for a lot of men who had used sexual services and were much more used to a bit of a performance
Mm.
or
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of a performance. So um, I think a lot of the men for whom I was the right kind of person, the kind that came back often and kind of deepened into a relationship in the same way that I would with a psychotherapy client. A lot of
Yeah.
those men were really looking to be welcomed and received. And my sort of premise really was um, I'm holding the space. I'm
Mm.
holding the space, which is what I do as a psychotherapist. I'm holding the space and I'm safe. we can find out what needs to happen here together. But I'm holding the space. And I think what I came to understand over those 10 years is that actually, in terms of sort of my erotic life and kind of libidinal joy and all those sorts of things, that is my favorite sexual position. To be holding the space, which is not really suitable for a, an ongoing partnership. It's, you can't, but I, I'm very, very interested in intimacy, connection, sort of understanding my own story in terms of relational matters, attachment, love, and connection. And yeah, that is my favorite sexual position. And I got to have 10 glorious, redemptive, healing years in which I gave a lot and received a lot. And when I started with that sort of call out, I had no idea about any of that. No idea
Yeah.
whatsoever. I kind of like sort of rolled onwards into understanding that. And the more deeply I understood that, the more beautifully it kind of worked, so to speak. It became sort of much more happening in the sort of, like a river is a river. It doesn't have to think about being a river. It just rivers away, and it became much more like that. And yeah, what I just said, I gave a lot, but I absolutely got given a lot. And if I think about that, whatever it was, sort of 10 years plus 6 or 7, you know, that much younger me, I just think, fucking hell. Like, I really bow to the me that, like, walked through that doorway, because it was a little bit radical. The psychotherapy police would not approve, and
Yeah.
To say the least.
to say the least. And in terms of the being out, I wrote some articles for, you know, psychotherapy websites. I talked about what I was doing. Um, Luckily, my procrastination had saved me from um, actually getting accredited by any of these bloody psychotherapy police sort of bodies of,
Yeah.
I mean, I was like halfway to the UKCP, and then I changed my mind about what I wanted to be, which department of psychotherapy I wanted to be in. By the time I faffed around with all that, the timing collided with this door opening, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go into the margins, because I don't ever want to be in a position where somebody's going to call me up to defend myself in
Mm.
one of these accreditation bodies. So I'm not accredited as a psychotherapist. And it means that if anybody ever did sort of call me on it professionally, I would just stand in my boots and my heart and speak my truth. And there would be no BACP, UKCP, anything, CP, anything, like involved. And, there've been some losses in that I can't work with training psychotherapists, which has been sad a few times, and I can't supervise people in training, can't work in the NHS. But actually, it means that I'm uncompromisingly uncompromised. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things about when you started, as you said, without without the internet, without people maybe being as into porn as they are now. And now, of course, when as Zoe said, we've got different types of therapy, some of which involve hands, tantra, um, possibly some of the work that you were doing back then, just a lot of these other things just weren't available. And so what you were doing was really kind of quite unique and quite radical. And I think also one of the interesting things is that managing to sneak in between all the performative sex workers and still be able to find people that respected and understood why they were there and what you were there to give
Mm.
was pretty amazing, because I know you could have ended up in a place where a lot of people turned up that were just fundamentally after a hand job, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And it seems like you kind of found a way through all of that to find people who understood that they might get a hand job, but but it wasn't going to be in the same way, in the same, wasn't going to be in the same way as maybe they had expected. And yeah, that takes some filtering and, yeah, keeping yourself safe. That's what I always worry about all of these sorts of situations, is keeping yourself safe.
yeah,
Is somebody walks into your space, you have to really, really know that you're not in danger.
yeah.
Did you ever feel through any of those 10 years that you were in a situation that potentially was quite dangerous?
I never felt unsafe, but I think I headed off quite a lot of unsafe at the
Yeah,
using the phone as the portal.
yeah, yeah.
What I did have to deal with probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 times was a full blown panic attack. A full blown um,
Really?
sort of kind of emotional blowout, and I think
Wow.
that is because those people, that it's contact. It's like we want contact, but then it's, for all sorts of reasons to do with people's trauma and stuff that, I'm not going to get told a narrative of, but the actual reality of getting contact just kind of sort of cracked a few people, sort of it kind of blew into something. And, luckily I was able to manage that because of who I am. But um, there's quite a high frequency of customers, clients, sort of having a freak out in a session. They've gone for maybe for full sex, as it's called, or a hand job or whatever, but somehow it takes some people somewhere, and then some people, they take something before they come to sort of, they might take some pills, or they might, I mean, I'm not talking about Viagra, but something sort of mood altering, something soothing, something, I mean, if somebody walks in or walked in and they were pissed, I just took some money off them and showed them out again. But, kind of some pills and what have you are more subtle than that. And I think probably people who really don't know how to handle a panic attack get sort of faced with one.
You know, we have so much trauma um, around sex and sexuality, and there's so many people. I can imagine
Yeah,
many of the people who would respond to your
yeah,
ad, who would be attracted to having loving touch, are people who
mm,
are missing that in their lives. And then to the vulnerability
mm,
of being in that position and
yeah,
receiving that, not wrapped up in the typical cultural narratives around sex. I can imagine how life altering that is. And there's an aspect of that I
Yes,
mean, I
yes.
see it in my practice all the time. I'm not hands-on, but just in talking about it, exploring it, and
Mm,
it's, there's a grief that can flood in when you realize what you've been
mm,
missing and what you've been longing for, and that this isn't really a regular part of your
mm,
life. It's not in your daily,
mm.
your relationships, maybe with your partner, maybe you don't have a partner, maybe you've never had a
Yeah,
partner, but to
exactly
all
that,
of a
Zoe.
sudden
Exactly
be in
that.
contact with this
It's
part of yourself can be earth-shattering.
it's like, as a therapist, I wouldn't always advocate that somebody does step into therapy. I mean, some people are, we have defense systems for very good reasons. And, if I'm
Yes.
taking some time to sort of consult sort of over a few sessions about a potential therapy, I would consider that a collaborative consultation. But then there's a place where, I can feel into what's there, and obviously they can sort of get a sense of me. But I've said no to people who want to have psychotherapy with me because I just think, like, bless you, if you do break open, there is, like, in this so-called compassionate society, there is nothing that will, like, offer you the kind of holding and containment that you would need to support you if you were going to, like, sort of break open, sort of, maybe, like, I think with the end of anything resembling a therapeutic community as a model, like, there's nowhere. And I can't sort of say yes to somebody because they can't move in with me and have 24/7 kind of, so it's like, for some people I would say, I'm really sorry, but I don't think it's a very good idea. And when you're kind of opening your door to a naked man, you don't have that space, obviously, to have a sense about sort of what may or may not be fruitful, may actually be counterproductive, may actually sort of kind of set off a reactivated trauma. So, there've been a couple of those moments where I've thought, oh my God. Mm, yeah. Oh yeah.
Pandora's box, right?
Didn't hear the second
Caroline,
part of
did
the
you have
question.
repeat clients and did you have rules around that? Did you have like rules and boundaries around repeat sessions? I know with sex surrogacy, there's a certain number of sessions that you are allowed by the licensing board, because after that it becomes um, the attachments and the
Mm,
feelings, the
mm,
emotions start to can for
mm.
many people start to cement a relationship, and it
I
becomes
didn't
something
really
other
have
than
a
therapeutic.
policy. I guess
What was your policy there?
I would say I I trusted myself to stay to stay with what felt healing, for lack of a better word. And if it stopped feeling, um, if it was
Hmm.
veering somewhere else, like, I did have a couple of um, men that came quite a few times, and it felt really nice, and sort of, when I say really nice, I mean connective, intimate in the right way. And on both occasions, something started to enter into the field, and I would say it was the beginnings of anger. It was the beginning of um, I can't, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like that you're not just mine. And actually, that was very, very sort of distinct. I could see it, feel it, smell it, almost before it started to formulate itself. And for me, that was like, we've got to wind this up, because not going here, it isn't useful for you. If I've been a helpful experience for you, I'm really, really glad, and you have mattered to me, you're dear to me, that is unequivocal. But what's starting to try and happen now, it's like I'm going to cut it off before it gets up ahead of steam. And I would be very direct and simple and straightforward, and I would say more or less what I've just said in a sort of appropriate to the person sort of way. But I would say it, I am not interested in something that has been very precious and has indeed been healing. I want you to internalize that and keep it, take it with you, and like kind of, you know, let it be sort of fertile and maybe grow something out of it. Stay with yourself and, see if, you do meet somebody, you bring the gifts of this to it. But I'm absolutely not going to collude with something that would, in a way, take a toxic wrecking ball to something that has been very clean and very simple. So I guess that's my version of, what's behind your question. I didn't have a sort of, okay. I mean, some people I saw for years, like, I don't know, just kind of without any stress or pressure, and like sometimes um kind of 6 months would go past, and then there'd be a little sort of coming sort of every couple of weeks for a bit, and then but like all those long term sort of dances, the quality that ran through them was ease, which I really dig ease. I love ease.
Mm.
So many people say to me, "Oh, you listen to people's problems." No, not really. I kind of meet people. I meet people where they will allow me to meet
Yes.
them, and we see what can happen that might be sort of reparative, redemptive, but it's always about connection and intimacy. It's so, the idea that a therapist or a counselor is somebody who sits and listens to people's problems is so far away from, the almost the mystery of the intimacy involved in like working in that realm. And if I mean, I remember like like this guy saying to me once, this old, not old, but he was like, I don't know, he was in his early 70s, and he was quite sort of broken in a way about, I think he probably was very disappointed about how life had gone. And I think he probably took Viagra when he came to see me, because he always had a sort of raging erection. And he obviously watched a lot of sort of porn, because he had a lot of sort of porn narrative. So he would, he would often kind of go, oh, what are you doing to me? Oh, what are you doing to me? And, I just remember the day I said, um, well, I'm not really doing anything to you. I've got your cock in my hand. But really, I've got your heart in my hand. And what I'm really doing is staying with you. I'm right here. I'm right here with you. Cock and heart indistinguishable, really. What if you take a deep, slow breath rather than the panting that's going on, and see if you can let what I've just said land? Just for a micro moment, it did. Just for that, and I'm sure he wasn't able to keep it, but it happened. That moment happened, and I really, like, I remember it so
Mm.
vividly. It was so tender. Tenderness happened in that moment, and I just, the, like, sort of sorrow and beauty in moments like that. I'm full of moments like that.
Caroline, you're a beautiful human being. Really.
Thank
I'm
you.
very moved
Thanks.
by your calling, your courage, your presence. You're really a healer, and we need more people like you
I'm
in the
sh-
world, stroking naked men.